Okay, we are almost ready to combine the different data sets on different spreadsheets. The next function we need is called VLOOKUP. The thing we do is now we're ready to combine the 4 spreadsheets according to the identifier we just created. We're going to use this our spreadsheet as the base, and then we're going to add the next 3 to it. So if you go to visits, you would notice that we have within visits and charges, we need to bring gross charges, the number of visits, and then units up there. For labor expenses, we're gonna need to bring PD expense, PTA expense, admin expense, and total expense. And lastly, for rent, we want to bring the rental rates. All of these columns back to our spreadsheet. So let's start with rent, as indicated in the PDF file you might be looking at right now. What we do is we put enter to call the function, and we do VLOOKUP. That's the VLOOKUP. And we need several inputs here. First, Excel needs to know what is the identifier. So identifier is in A1. So click on A1 or you type A1. That's the identifier. And what table are we looking at? We're looking at rents. Oops. Okay. Then the next one is we want to know which column. We didn't count it, but if you go to rent after we're done with this or before that, you will notice that rental rate is recorded in the 5th column. So we're going to put 5 here. And lastly, it's a true-false selection. We always put false, basically asking you whether you want the match to be an exact match or it could be partial match. Basically, I can't think of any situation where you need to put true here. So it's virtually always false. You always want to do an exact match. So hit enter, and you will notice that rental rate, the label is up here. If you drag it down to the bottom, this will be the rental rates from the last spreadsheet we have. Right? So that's the rental rate. And let me pull rent here. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why we put 5 in that function. That's the number of columns. This is kind of awkward, but you have to count it. And this is the same for visits and charges. For gross charges, it's column 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're gonna need to take a note of that so that when we try to bring the data, we know it. Visits number 5, units number 6, and for labor expenses, PT expenses 5, PTA 6, admin 7, total is 8. Okay, let's do the same thing and bring the rest of the spreadsheet to our table here. So I'm gonna do it without much explanation, just to kind of speed up the process. It's up there, and we need visits right here, and we need, for visits, we need 4 first, and it's false, right? And I want to do the next one first before I drag it down. And I need that one. Visits 5 false, and then VLOOKUP. Lookup A1 visits and column 6 false. VLOOKUP A1. Now we're gonna do expenses starting from 5 false, Actually, I'm gonna do this and to change it. All right, so let me explain what I did, because I always look for shortcuts to speed up the process. I just started from the cell, I go to the bottom, the little dot, I drag all the way to P because I know I'm gonna need to enter 3 more up there. And I'm kind of tired of typing up this formula again and again. What happens is if you click on M, you would notice the value here changed from A1 to B1, which doesn't make sense. That's why Excel gave me this number NA, not available, results. That's an easy fix. What I need to do is really to change B1 into A1, hit enter. That will fix the problem for me automatically. Another thing that you would notice that it always returns 5, even though I drag it down to column P. So I do need to change this 5 to 6, so that Excel can move to the next column, and this is to 7, and the last one to 8. All right, and this time I want to apply the formulas for all of these columns all together. So I drag down to the bottom to apply the formulas. There we go. So there we are. We got all other spreadsheets data brought up to this our spreadsheet. They will have a good spreadsheet. So the last topic we're going to talk about is how to create pivot table and how we can manipulate pivot table to show various things. A pivot table is a very nice feature provided by Excel to allow you kind of summarize the data. If you go through this page here, the screen here, I mean, it's a lot of data, it's a lot of numbers, and you don't get anything out of it, right? You definitely need to analyze the data. Of course, we have other tools, statistical tools to analyze data, but there are a lot of times you may just need to know, oh, what is the, like say, total charges by state? What is the total hours by clinic and by state? If that's the case, then pivot table is the right answer for you, right? So to create this pivot table, first thing we always want to do is really to highlight the whole spreadsheet. And the reason being, if we do that, then the pivot table will update when we update the whole spreadsheet. For example, right now we have 610, actually 609 observations. If in the future we add more observations, pivot table will update automatically with your new entry. So you highlight the whole spreadsheet and you want to do insert pivot table. My suggestion is you want to create this new pivot table in a new worksheet. So we're gonna click on OK, and then right here you would see on the left-hand side a little table that is not showing anything useful yet. On the right-hand side, we see our different options for us to choose and to create this table. All right. Before we actually create the table, one thing I want to mention is that if you accidentally click on any cell outside the table, you don't see the right side option anymore. But to bring it back, all you need to do is really to click the pivot table area. You will see the options. The options are important because there are times maybe you want to change your pivot table to show different things. So we're going to first start to kind of summarize the clinical hours by state. First, we tell Excel that we want to create different rows by state. Then once you click and drag state to this box rows, you will see the pivot table turns to be one column table with different states listed. And the next thing we want to do is because we want to summarize clinical hours by state, so we click on clinical hours, drag it to values beside rows, and there we go. So we got the count of clinical hours by state. However, two things we need to fix here. Number one, most likely we don't want the count. We want the actual total of hours. Number two, you notice that there's this blank here in the last entry. We have that because we highlight the whole spreadsheet. If that bothers you, it's very easy to get rid of this blank thing here. You're going to click on this drop down button and then scroll down in this box until you see blank, unclick it, click OK, then blank is gone. That's one thing. The other thing we want to fix is to work on the count of clinical hours. Instead of count of clinical hours, we want the total amount of hours. So what you do is you double click on this title here. So let me do that again. You click a cursor here, double click on it. You will see a pop-up window allowing to choose different way to summarize the value. Right now, the default is count, but if we want to sum, we click on the sum. If you want average, you can do that as well. So as of right now, let's just do sum. Click on OK, and this column will be updated automatically to show the total clinical hours by state. Right. So that's a simple pivot table. Let's say the next thing we want to do is maybe we want to break down the clinical hours by pay period, right? By state and also by pay period. So what we do is we'll go back to the right side and then pay period PPE, we click on it and drag it to columns. So there we go. We have the total hours by state in the first column and by pay period by listed in the second and the third column. Suppose maybe right now we do not care that much about the states. Maybe we want to show for a single state what happens. Then we can move state to filters. That way, what we have is here on the top, you will see state multiple items. Right here, you can decide which state you want to show, right? If you click on select multiple items and click on AL, Alabama, this table will change to the information for Alabama only, or maybe you want to do Indiana, do that. And then if you want to do a couple of states, select multiple items, and then let's do Alabama and Indiana, click on OK. So we have that. We can filter this information by state if we move state to this filter box on the right-hand side. All right, so next thing we want to do is let's get rid of clinic, and the reason being clinics are recorded as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That doesn't help that much because different states may all have clinic 1. So let's get rid of clinic as the as the row factors. Instead, let's drag PPE from columns to rows, and we want to show PPE as pay period ending as the categories, right? So we have February, March, all the way to December. Maybe we just want to ask, so what are the clinical hours by different pay period ending or by different month, like that. So this table right now only shows clinical hours. Now, if you're interested in something else, let's say maybe gross charges, all you do is really to drag gross charges to the value here, and maybe number of visits, drag it down here. Now we show more. We see clinical hours, number of visits, and gross charges. Now notice again for gross charges and count of visits, we still have the count, and we want to change it to sum. We can do that, and we want to change it to sum. We can do that. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is what if you want to do some calculation within the pivot table? That is possible sometimes if you want to say calculate the productivity of the clinics, and we want to know how many patients they see in a day or within 8 hours. Then in that way, we need to enter a formula within the pivot table. Right. So what we do is we click on inside the pivot table, and then on the top, when you click on the table, on the top, you will see pivot table tools. Under it, there's this analyze And you're gonna need to go to calculation right here. With that, this is the only one that you can select. So apparently you're gonna select fields, item, and stats, and then select calculated field. Right? Now we have a pop-up box. You can name the field, enter the formula, and do the calculation. So now, since we're gonna calculate productivity, I'm gonna type that as the name of the calculated field. And now we need to enter the formula. All right. So with the formula, what we do is we use the number of visits divided by clinical hours divided by 8. So let's do that. Let me locate the visits and then divide by, open parenthesis, clinical hours. Let's see, clinical hours. Double click that, divide by 8, close parenthesis. You can also type it. It's my preference to click on the item or the fields so that they fill in my formula directly. All right. So now if you click on OK, we could see productivity. Although for these two, we don't see any numbers, which is okay, basically because the clinical hours